When you're a rabbinical student, you are sometimes invited to lead services in different congregations. And sometimes, in one of such services, quite a few years ago, and I don't want you to try to figure out which community it was, but it was in a different country, so it wasn't in the UK. So that's important for me to say. And in that community, it was very important to them when you go up the bima and when you go to the second step, because there were stairs leading up to the bima. When you go up to the second step, you have to bow. And a curious mind would naturally ask, why second step? Why not the third step? Why not before the steps? And nobody in that community could tell me why. All they could do is to say, this is a tradition. And they asked me to respect it, which I did. But afterwards, I asked one person, the other person, and then at some point, I spoke to a founding member of that synagogue. And this person explained to me that this is their second building. But in their first building, there was an obstacle leading up to the bima. So all people had to go a bit lower so that they wouldn't hit their head. And when they moved to the second building, some people thought that was a tradition. It wasn't just, it was done deliberately, they thought, so that to make you bow. And they did it. And it raises lots of questions about tradition. Which traditions we keep because they're meaningful, and which traditions we shouldn't. So this week's Torah portion is Shlach Lecha. Its central story is famous story of 12 spies who went to scout the land and see what the state of land is and all the nations who live there. But at the very end of this week's Torah portion, there is a text that's often overlooked by progressive communities. This is the commandment to wear tzitzit, the tassels. Tzitzit are ritual fringes, tassels added to the four-corner garments. So any garment that has four corners is supposed to have this. This is decoration. These are. But this is the commandment. Originally, these 3 strings were supposed to be white, and the fourth should be a special shade of blue, in Hebrew, techelet. In time, the technique of producing techelet color was forgotten and probably lost. And nowadays, most of them are white. But recently, they think that they figure out how to make that original blue color. And nowadays, sometimes you will see that one strings can be blue. But why do we wear them? This is one of the traditions. Is it the one we should keep? Or it's like bowing in the second step? What can be a progressive religious take on wearing tzitzit? To answer these questions, we need to look at the idea, I think, on the idea of belonging. What does it mean to belong? Anywhere, to a synagogue or to any other community. When you move school, for example, when you move schools or join a new team or community, what does it take you to feel at home in a new place? In my view, there are 3 ingredients of the sense of belonging. One is knowledge and skills. You need to know what's happening in the new place and what to expect when you come to one place or the other. And you need to understand how to behave, knowledge and skills. The second is community, knowing people around you. Isn't it nice when you walk into a shop or a synagogue and people know you by name? This is the second ingredient of belonging. And the third, I think, is your personal life choices. What you do often is a reflection of who you are. And a good example is, for example, a software engineer. What kind of app you put on your personal phone would be different for a software engineer from a regular, ignorant person who doesn't really know much about technology. So it is the last point, I think, personal life choices, that Tzitzit represents. Professor Ishayahu Leibovitz discusses the Tzitzit and distinguishes between ethical and religious obligations in Judaism. In ethical obligations, Leibovitz argues that a person should treat others as human beings without any criteria other than feels right or wrong for you as a person. One may follow the golden rule of treating others as they would like to be treated, or not doing to others what's hateful to you. This is ethical life, ethical obligations that any religion has or any society has. But religious obligations are based on living in accordance with a religious worldview. It means that instead of asking oneself if something feels right or wrong, or if what I'm doing is something that the other person would want. But the question, religious question, is what does God require of me? Or if you prefer more neutral, and if you're uncomfortable with God language, the question is, what does the world require of me? A religious worldview is a belief that your life has meaning and purpose, and that your actions are important to this world. Tzitzit is a reminder of commandments according to the Torah. It is a reminder to stay on the right path and not be led astray by personal desires and temptations to abandon this worldview. My life matters to this world, says Tzitzit, according to the Ishayahu Leibovitz. What I say and do can bring a lot of good to this world, and also can bring a lot of bad, but it can bring a lot of good. And I am here for a reason. Early Talmudic rabbis had a similar worldview. They saw Tzitzit as a sign of freedom. Before the Exodus, say the rabbis, the people were forced to wear some kind of a sign, some kind of a badge of slavery. So that would indicate to Egyptians that you are not a free person, but you are a slave. The badges were a constant reminder of Jewish slavery. After being freed, the people are instructed to wear tzitzit, to wear a different sign. Another symbol, serving as a sign for their liberation of freedom. These fringes, these tassels, they testify, or they remind Jewish people to never be slave to anything or anyone again. Talmud, the tractate Menachot, records a lengthy discussion of rabbis about tzitzit. One of the questions they ask is whether a blind person should wear them. Because tzitzit, you're supposed to look at them. And if you are blind, do you still need to wear them or not? Raise your hand if you think rabbis decreed that yes, you still should wear even if you're blind. Okay? Now raise your hand if you don't think that you should wear if you're blind. Okay. Interesting, isn't it? So both views are recorded in Talmud, so you are safe. Whatever opinion you represent, but the majority rabbis rule that yes, you still need to wear them. Because tzitzit are not only for you to see, but it is like a sign, but not sign of slavery, but the sign of freedom. so that other people would look at you and see. So, Midrash Rabbah has a good story about it. A group of people were traveling in a boat. One took a drill and started drilling a hole beneath himself. His companion said to him, "Why are you doing this?" The man replied, "What concern is it of yours? Am I not drilling under my own place?" They told him, "But you will flood the boat for us all." And the idea fits very well with the context of this week's Torah portion. This idea of something collective, that what you do affects others in the world. Your life choices are not only about you, but they also affect others. 10 out of 12 spies could not see real people behind the nations who lived in the promised land. They couldn't see that the people, the nations that lived there are real people. They could only see Nephilim, these giants who were so powerful, had seemed so distant from them, that the spies were scared of them. 10 out of 12 spies were scared of them. And by doing so, they diminished themselves and became like grasshoppers. Small and insignificant. The idea of Tzitzit reminds you that nobody is better or worse than you. After liberation from Egyptian slavery, the sign of slavery was forever replaced by the movement or the sign of liberty. Does it mean that we, liberal Jews, today should start wearing tzitzit every day and out so that people would see it? I will leave this to each individual to decide, and I think this is what liberal means, to have a personal freedom. But for me, the principle of tzitzit is very powerful. Every aspect of your life can become a statement and a sign of who you are. There is more to Jewish life than being in a synagogue. There is more to Jewish life than just prayer. Being Jewish doesn't end when you live at the building of a synagogue. All your life reflects who you are, what you eat, how you speak in public, and what you wear. Being Jewish is to believe that your life is as important as the life of everybody else around you, regardless of who they are. It is to believe that life has meaning and purpose, and the best way to live your life is not to ask whether this world is good for you, but to ask is whether you good to this world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.